Through more than 2 decades at Kenner and Hasbro, Aaron built worlds, told stories, and designed toys for some of pop culture's biggest names, including Transformers, Batman, Star Wars, and more. Join him as he explores the archives and tells you the stories of the creative process behind your favorite toys. This is the Toy Armada with your host, Aaron Archer.
We are back again with another Toy Armada with Aaron Archer, and we're going to be revisiting again today the Transformers Armada brand. We feel that with 2022 and going into 2023, we're going to be celebrating the 20th anniversary with Armada. Hasbro has already talked about how next year with their Transformer Legacy line, they will be covering more Armada characters and properties. We already have a few that are going to be coming into 2022. So we figured, why not? Last time when we talked about Armada, there was a whole bunch of characters we kind of just glazed over, and we're going to kind of revisit some of those and go through them deeply, cover some little deep information that are in the corners of the internet and everything like that, and get it from the source himself. And who is that source? Well, it's Aaron Archer. How you doing, Aaron?
Hey, I'm doing real well today.
Alrighty, so let's jump into it right away. We're going to cover, again, some characters, because when we went through it last time, and if there is characters that we don't talk about today, we probably, I feel like with Armada, we're going to be revisiting it a lot over the next couple of months, where once in a while we'll do little segments, just, hey, we're going to talk about this guy or that guy, because it seems to be a very popular brand with the newer generation of Transformer fans. You've told me already in the past that you've gone to conventions and now you're seeing more people that grew up with Transformers Armada. And now those are the adults of this industry. I definitely talk
about Armada more than anything, or more than I have in years, yes.
Yeah, so it's something where now, you know, there's that breadth of interest. There's a whole bunch of characters that resonate with people, and those are trademarks and names that they grew up with, as opposed to, let's say, the Bumblebees of the past or the Wheeljacks of the past and everything like that, or even the Beast Wars kids. So let's jump into that. The first one we're going to cover, and I'm surprised that we didn't talk more about him, considering how much of an important character he is in the grand scheme of things. We'll start first with Transformers Armada Sideways, a.k.a., as he was called in the Japanese side, Double Face. He was that Supercon price point, a.k.a. the deluxe class, the purple motorcycle, and he was again using that old Transformers idea of the faction swapping character that started with Punch, Double Punch, and later Double Dealer. So how did that whole concept come about, like this character from start to finish in a lot of ways?
Yeah, we've discussed these early meetings where Takara had a lot of different models and we're putting different concepts out on the table in 2D form as well. Again, they had archived a whole bunch of concepts over the years that we were doing Beast Wars, that for the types of toys and features that just didn't work for the Beast Wars format of product, the thinness of the limbs and things. So they had all these action features, spring-loaded type features, gimmicks, waiting around in a way. So Sideways falls into that. They had this idea of, what if you had two robots that did something that come together and activated the feature. So in those discussions, as we got deeper in, so that was an early presentation of ways Minicons could work. And then as we got into the story development, it made sense that you would have some sort of double dealing character. And that feature was perfect for that kind of storyline. I was really always interested in trying to tell the story with the toys as well. So getting that reveal change depending on how you put the Minicon on, that was all started very early in those kind of brainstorm sessions about how we're going to make the Minicons be really special per item.
And that's interesting too, because I've seen in the past where with a lot of these old Japanese generation guidebooks and stuff where Takara would have a whole bunch of just these supplemental amount of ideas.
Yeah.
Hey, what if we did Transformers that turned into Universal monsters? What if we did... And all this stuff never happens. It's just them, throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what will stick. And so what you're saying pretty much is he was one of those ideas and concepts that were kind of birthed out of that 90s era Takara. And then finally they're getting a chance to kind of, hey, remember that thing we did before? And so I guess...
Well, as they were trying to figure out what Trans-Tech would be, and even some of the Beast Machines type features, they explored a lot of different things, and those are the things that came back out on the table early. So it was more somewhat fresh in the late 90s opportunities that they explored.
And the idea of the two, now we know them as the Minicons, Rook and Crosswise, but the two Minicons combining to make the driver and stuff, that was an idea that was from that old idea.
The idea was two different robots somehow come together to form a bigger robot that then activates something in another robot.
Okay.
so you take these concepts and then you find out how can I make that applicable to the story, the price point. Okay, now we got Minicons. Okay, now we got two small guys, really small guys. How can we make them do something? Okay, what if they combine? Okay, that's kind of crazy. Sideways has a lot of weird, again, like these early Armada toys. There's a lot of overbuilt in there. There's two Minicons that combine to form a rider that has its own look, masked, helmeted, Dark Rider look. They come apart and form two Minicons that kind of have a positive and negative samurai feel to them. They transform into their own head forms that then trigger Sideways' activation, who become, it's a great bike into a robot. There's a lot going on with that character for a motorcycle on top of that.
For that deluxe price point.
Yeah, and motorcycles, I will always tell people, are some of the toughest Transformers to make because there's so many open areas. They kind of can catch air and get bigger with cowls and buckets and stuff, but there's still a lot of internal structure that you get into in the middle of the bike that you just don't have a lot of space to make a great robot. So they're often very skinny. Sideways, not only because of the gimmick, but he's got a small weird head. So motorcycle Transformers in general are difficult.
And it's no surprise that even some of the earliest motorcycle Transformers from Transformers history were all those larger kind of, we use the term like the Easy Rider kind of motorcycles.
Yeah.
Look at Wreck-Gar, big fat kind of motorcycle, Groove, the classic motorcycle from Chips, if you will, for people know in pop culture.
The Blue GoBot was a big kind of cop bike.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's always when the old Japanese engineers had to do a motorcycle, they're like, well, we got to use a fat bike. We couldn't use a speed bike.
You need the material. Yeah.
Yeah. And then obviously later on, with ball joints and technology, G2 started with the speed bikes and stuff with the laser cycles, but as time progresses, then I guess they started to, maybe we could make skinny characters.
Well, look at the bike that comes with Kicker. I mean, it's a very skinny dirt bike.
High wire.
And look at the robot you get out of that. It proves out, So if you have those buckets and cowling and fairing and bumpers and everything, pipes, it gives you a lot of opportunity to make a cooler robot.
And speaking of which, you were... Okay, continue what you're going to say, sorry.
So some of the other things about that bike, well, maybe I'll get to that later. What do you got?
Well, because I was just going to say, at what point was the decision, we're going to go with, this is going to be a motorcycle that has this headmastery kind of gimmick with it? Because obviously, like you said, we have these two robots, they're going to combine, and then they activate some kind of play feature.
Pretty early that was getting developed. Yeah, that he was one of the, first 6 or so of the kind of the launch wave. When I say I sat down at Takara and kind of went through a whole stack of robots one by one, he was definitely in that first 7 or 8 characters that we did.
Okay,
so he was well developed, well concepted, well planned at that point to be somewhat of a character in a story that would be doing some sort of code switching. We just didn't know how in the story that would manifest itself, of course. But we gave the writers that option.
Well, especially you said he was one of the earlier ones where, like you've said in the past, early in Armada's development, Unicron wasn't on the plate.
Yeah.
So story-wise, Sideways.
He may have just been a spy for Megatron.
Origin.
Yeah.
Could have. Well, which historically in the past stuff like that has existed, so it wouldn't be out of the question that there'd be some kind of character that does that. I have a rumor here, supposedly, that the colors of the motorbike were based off of a Takara employee's actual motorbike. Is that true? I don't know.
Yeah.
It was.
The engineer, Shiragami-san, is... he at the time, he was a young man, engineer, and was still racing bikes on the weekends. He would travel to, like, Yokohama or somewhere south, and, like, that's how he spent his weekends, really hardcore motorcycle racing. And so the purple is an echo of the purple on his bike. The deco isn't exactly like his bike. The bike isn't his bike. His bike was much more colorful and ornate and graphic than I was going to be able to do, but I echoed the vibe of the purple. So, yeah.
Very awesome. Nice to know. Another thing, too, supposedly... and I've seen this myself as a completist. Supposedly the initial wave of Sideways figures, they actually had a kind of a running change where initially the 2 robots activated the Autobot and Decepticon gimmick backwards, and then later on they did a second wave where it fixed that. I think it was... The initial run was Rook revealed the Decepticon logo and Crosswise revealed the Autobot one, and then later on it changed that. Is that something that normally happens as a mistake, or like the miscommunication with the factory?
I don't recall that one per se, but yeah, that would have just been one Takara engineers would have realized. And we were so jammed on getting product out for that launch in September that if Takara came to us at a certain point and said, "Oh, we gotta do this running change," we would have probably said, "Well, don't stop production to do it. Just keep going." That is the toy industry too, because this is all scheduled manufacturing. So sometimes you kind of have to deal with stuff like that. In this case, I don't recall if that's exactly what happened, but that type of thing does happen.
There's no information because I own both versions, so I know it does exist. It's just I'm very curious how that would have came about. Just the last thing we're going to cover with Sideways before we move on is he would later on, when you guys would do Energon, he'd be repainted into a character called Rapid Run, a yellow repaint and stuff. Was there any... I mean, we're going to do Energon as a separate segment in the future one day, but is there any reasoning why they chose to use that mold for Energon? Was it because he wasn't repainted in Armada and they figured might as well
it's exactly,
do that?
Yeah, exactly that. At a certain point, we had... really, when you think of Costco exclusives and all kinds of things that Armada products got put under, we had exhausted the use of a lot of the molds in Armada. We had used them up a lot of different ways and colorways, and Sideways was definitely one that we didn't. So he was available.
Okay, cool. That one is that's a tougher one to find. Those repaints, the Energon ones. So next one we're going to cover. We're going to cover Sideswipe, also known as Stepper in his Japanese incarnation. According to a post here of a rumor, a certain person named Orson on the TFW 2005 message boards, which you may not know who that is, claimed that originally this character was supposed to be called Nightbeat, and then somehow it got mixed up with his Minicon, and the Minicon ended up being called Nightbeat. Any confirmation of that? Do you remember?
That I do not remember.
Yeah. Well, supposedly that guy named Orson. I don't know.
That's
what he said.
His one of the Minicon names that was gonna be in here was gonna be Gun Barrel, that we did use later.
Used it. Yeah, I used it later with the Galvatron.
Because Gumbaru in Japanese means hardworking or dedicated.
Gambare. Yeah.
Yeah. So gun barrel is a kind of a tricky way to get it
to kind of put it in there. I see what you mean.
Yeah. So what do you want to know about this character? Because I can dissect it a few different ways.
Oh yeah. Well, so first again, he was a blue Nissan Skyline R32, legendary car in Japanese culture. Not so much known here because that car wasn't street legal in its initial run with Nissan. Obviously, it had to be 10 years old for it to be street legal. There's all kinds of red tape with cars made for street racing, but that's a whole other conversation. Point being is he transformed to a Nissan Skyline R32, very gorgeous looking car. The thing with Sideswipe was that was always the point of contention was his robot mode. He had a very almost kind of embodies the negative aspects of Armada that the fans would always point to, stuff where it was just this very blocky kind of weird design. He did have a cool Minicon gimmick. He had this like kind of bike storage kind of thing going on in the back, which was unique. And he had a gimmick that also wasn't Minicon activated, which it was just you pushed this, the front end of the car on the hood, and then it did this kind of lunging punch kind of gimmick, which wasn't Minicon activated, which was also kind of bizarre considering how the play pattern had been up to that point, and how, again, Minicon activated ports are such a key element of the toys. And then he had all these like little clear weapons that kind of were all over the place. Like, it's very, very weird product. Very weird product. A lot of weird things going on. So I'd like to hear, and not to mention, and it's not really that much important to the product, but he also was side space swipe. That's how the trademark was. You guys would continue doing side swipe as two separate words, even going into alternators, until you would then be able to do it on the normal going into Cybertron and stuff like that. But so there's also that weird aspect of it too. So tell me about this guy.
So, you hit upon a lot of things that you clearly notice when you look at it. And when I tell you the story, you'll be like, oh, okay, maybe that makes sense then. Armada was doing well. At the time we're developing Sideswipe, which was a later item. I think at least the first presentations to sales forces and things had happened with Armada. So we knew good things were happening. I don't know if the sales had hit the actual open market yet. But we already needed more items, and he came in at a time that was off schedule a little bit for a wave. He was kind of in between waves, and we actually designed that one in Rhode Island with Hirasan. So I went to Japan for multiple weeks, a couple of times, to sit and really vibe with the team and create toys together. That's what co-development should be. And over the long years, Joe Kide, Lenny, Jared Waite, all those guys went over there. Eric Siebenaler for multiple weeks. It was kind of a boot camp in a way that we started doing with the designers that were really taking that leap deeper into the Transformers franchise. Right, working with Takara is a big part of that, and it working with partners and with another company. It's a kind of a different procedure, at least at the time. So we were doing that, and we kept doing that. So I was the first. And along the way, a few different times, Japanese designers came to Rhode Island and would stay for multiple weeks. And so Hirasan came. After I went, he was the first Japanese designer to come and stay for a few weeks. And so one of the products we worked on in Rhode Island with Hirasan was Sideswipe. Now, we didn't have all of the tools that we normally had. Hirasan is a great friend of mine, but what I didn't know at the time was how they trained their people at Takara. So Hirsan now is like a marketer, a lead marketer, a head business guy. He's very well thought of, as far as I recall, or know today. But he's not necessarily a designer by trade, is what I recall. But that was part of the procedure of how they trained their marketing staff, was they were trained on how to, if they had some design ability, they would be a designer for a while and really learn what it took to make toys. So we did this in my office, kind of playing phone tag and international tag with Shiragami-san or whoever the engineer was at the time, trying to make this product in Hasbro under the same conditions that we did the other ones. And it was just different and difficult in a way, to not have the full, all the answers, to be able to realize, oh, wait a minute, we didn't put a Minicon feature on there, or we were so enamored with the motorcycle flipping that we thought that was the Minicon feature. You know what I mean? The punching thing, never worked well, unfortunately. A little too much going on in the whole product. Those flip out windows that kind of just sit on the side are obviously unfortunate. One of the better things about the whole dang robot is his head, which is a small consolation. He is based on a Skyline. That was Hirasan's kind of his inside joke, right? I made forms and figures like Snowcat that made me entertained as I was designing these things. So he went with a more traditional Skyline look. So that's kind of some of the things I recall. He doesn't pose well, we know that.
Yeah, well, and again, going back to the whole, like, him deciding to use a Skyline, again, for people that aren't aware, like, that's like the Mustang of Japan. Like, that's the big muscle power car of Japan, and it's a cornering machine. So for him to use that, especially, it's kind of funny. He goes to America to build a Japanese inspired car. Very funny.
And I think that's how we ended up with, not only did a Harley style bike, fit the form, but it is kind of a funny American motorcycle, Japanese supercar, right?
The magic of co-development.
Yeah. So these are these subtle inside jokes, that not inside jokes, but just camaraderie that you're infusing into these products to make it fun for yourself as you go through your day, right? So that's kind of a funny thing too. And then the fact that his name was going to be Gun Barrel, that was definitely Hirasan's kind of humor.
Well, and it's something that's such a shame because, you look at a lot of the product that comes out today, and I still love a lot of the product that comes out today from an engineering standpoint and choice of characters, but there's not a lot of newness. And you look at stuff like this, and, you could rag on the negativity of all the stuff in relation to Sideswipe from an articulation standpoint, everything. But you do see the soul of that character and the creativity of the people who are involved in it that make that unique to itself, where let's look at any G1 Sideswipe we've gotten in the past 5 years. They're all just based off of that old Kojin Ono design from 1982, Yeah, so, and they've been doing the same thing, unfortunately, in perpetuity for
since I left. You mean? Did I say that out loud?
15 years, Jesus Christ. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, and another oddity about that one is he's got the clear windows, and that made it difficult also, right? Because that's a different type of mold, and you can't fudge anything because you're seeing through those windows.
And every time, this is to ask, so every time you use clears, and then you have to factor in, well, now we're using a clear plastic. To add detail, there has to be a paint budget there.
Yeah, so well, it's a double whammy, triple whammy, maybe even. You have to have a separate mold that, period. Now it's clear. Clear is more expensive, and yes, you have to then paint out areas solidly, so a good amount of paint, not just coverage, but opacity. So yeah, doing clear windows costs a lot of your budget. So that didn't help that guy's situation probably.
Yeah, made the whole roof of the car all that blue. It's not blue plastic; it's paint to kind of just make everything match.
So that's a good test case telling future toy design people, what's up with that guy and why.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to focus on some of these, because some of these, like they're good, solid single examples of stuff. But we could look at the Minicon though. Nice little motorcycle, Nightbeat, which is a popular name in Transformers. So
big ocular eye.
Yeah, at least that was like the consolation to me. I remember when I got it, I was like, well, you know what? The alt mode is cool. Again, as a car guy, so the alt mode is cool. You had a Minicon named Nightbeat, so hey, that classic character is kind of back in some shape or form. Now he's a detective motorcycle, I guess. I don't know. And then it had that cool little, storage gimmick. I appreciate that. That was kind of cool, the way that it stored the motorcycle. So that was kind of like a nice thing, where all the Minicons up to that point didn't really have a good storage place, I guess. They would just kind of plock on, and that would be it. So that was also a nice little thing, too.
Yeah, I liked how the helicopter
has one.
The helicopter was pretty good.
Yeah, it was Cyclonus too had it.
It came on his nose. Yeah, the Cyclonus.
So, and then of course that mold afterwards would be used for the universe battle in the box stuff that you guys were doing, Oil Slick and Tread Shot. And then a couple years later in 2006, you would retool it into Cybertron Run Amok, and you would kind of tool out a lot of the Minicon gimmick and did some other wacky stuff with that. It was an homage to an old G1 character. But that mold saw 4 repaints in its history, and that character later on would be turned into a BotCon exclusive. So you started to see later on in the late 2010s and stuff that, even though this character did not get a very good toy initially, people were making attempts to make better versions of him, because I guess they want the character to have a good toy at the end.
Yeah, he's like an interesting character that suffers from being a debut as a kind of a weird brick, or what do you call that? Shit hanging off of it kind of guy. Kibble.
Yeah,
he's a kibble guy for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, but otherwise, again, I have a feeling, again, because he's one of those characters that has like the Sideswipe trademark. And considering how Hasbro's already kind of milked that G1 character to the ground now, I feel that one day we're probably going to see this character in a modern form, just because of his name association. One day they're just going to be like, hey, we got to do a Sideswipe. Well, why not this?
And any of that name stuff, whether it's hyphenated or Autobot name, insert name, all that was just to get by the trademarks, like whatever we had to do. Oh, we can't get Sideswipe right now. Well, what about Sideswipe? Okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't, that didn't matter to anybody else. So that's what we had to do. It wasn't a tactical goal to do that. It was just what we had to do.
And speaking of trademarks, our next guy we're going to talk about actually had a little bit of a trademark story here, which again, supposedly it came from Aaron Archer, the story, so we'll reconfirm that in a moment. Let's talk about Smokescreen, a.k.a. Grap, as he was known in Japan. This was the infamous orange construction vehicle that, if you were collecting Transformers Armada back in the day, was probably the biggest shelf warmer of the bunch, along with Laserbeak. But otherwise, me personally, I kind of liked it. I don't know why. It was a simple toy, but it kind of did what it needed to do. Again, construction crane, had a fantastic Minicon lift door. Cool little fantastic Minicon that was a forklift that had a very cool sculpted face on it with like a one-eye kind of thing going on.
I have a lot of one-eyed kind of guys.
Yeah, but I dug it. Like it kind of had it's
an Archer trait.
Fantastic little sculpt and design for the Minicon. Again, he was a simple kind of transformation. Has the Minicon gimmick with his crane thing, so it flips out to make a giant cannon. There's some okay, this is something. So the veneering and the sculpting. So there's an opening hatch on his construction mode. That when you open, it's this little hatch that he has. It opens up for like the inside of the vehicle, and there's just this little sculpted gear. It's not like a sculpted cockpit or something. There's just a gear. Do you remember anything about that?
Yeah, I think that was going to be a port of some sort.
A Minicon port. That's why
we phased out and kind of left the door.
And then so you just like veneered like a gear, a little gear detail, just to do something with it.
Well, again, my theory is if it's an empty surface, put something in there to create the imagination potential. You know.
Yeah, you said that with Jetfire. Armada Jetfire, you covered with that especially.
Yeah.
So again, what do you remember about this guy? Because I know that this one was like this one. I read online that it was kind of like, I'll just read some statements and then you could confirm them. Aaron Archer stated years after the fact on his Instagram account that Smokescreen, one of the designs he considers the bottom of the barrel, blaming the fact that it was one of the last toys designed in that wave. He also regrets calling it the name Smokescreen. Apparently, it was implied that the character was not supposed to be called Smokescreen initially, but they didn't have anything that was available for trademarks and was borrowed from the also at the time in development line of alternators. Smokescreen was the first alternators toy, and that was that. According to Aaron Archer, he envisioned the character being like the Thing from Fantastic Four. Confirm and or deny any of that? Sound about right?
Well, the Thing Fantastic Four is probably after the fact.
Okay.
Storytelling, well, okay, looks like the Thing. Yeah, that's what we were going for.
Okay.
I don't know. I should look at that document that we show at from time to time.
At TFCon that we do.
Yeah, and see what that name list was for him. That might trigger something for me. But Smokescreen was just a cool Transformer name, not associated necessarily with the previous character, but it was just a kind of a cool car name, right? Or a truck.
It's one of those names that it could be a jet.
Yeah,
it could
exactly.
Be a car. It could go anywhere. So
this was this is an item I worked a lot on. So when I say that I dislike it, I want to be clear and I want to state this for the first time openly. It is my fault I don't like it. Whenever I talk about it, I mention that, we were squeezed a little bit for time and Yuki-san left and, we had to take out some of the stuff and the mold plan got too orange and these things. It is not on anybody but me not knowing enough and having not enough time to think it through. I don't like the colors. I like the gimmick. I hate the head. He gets a little floppy as a robot, we all know that.
I think also stability, because the crane is pretty crazy. I love that the crane gets, as long as it does, which is kind of cool. That's kind of a toy thing. How much can you pack in that
extend?
Price
yeah, that's a classic toy designer thing. Like if you got a toy that you can really get it to extend long instead of just a little bit, that's kind of a pride factor. His Minicon is pretty cool. I wish his Minicon did not share as much of the mold as he does, because I feel like they both look like it does look like they're a team, but it's a lot
similar in the color scheme.
Yeah, exactly. It's a lot of orange and blue in the package, which then makes it. It's an orange truck. It's a utility truck. That crane isn't so authentic that. It's like a replica for some other kind of truck that a kid might want, a Tonka truck or something. So I think that all factored into why it might have been a shelf warmer. It's kind of and kids sometimes, I made it bright orange, kind of really put it to that young kid aesthetic. And some kids rebel against that. They're like, it's a little kid toy. I'm not into it.
A little too Fisher Price, maybe in their mind.
Yeah, that happens. That does happen. I love the fact that we had the string with the hook.
I was going to ask about that. Like, was that like?
Well, this is those early. Yeah, these are those early Armada developments where they all almost have three kind of features. There's a Minicon feature. There's some sort of something, and then like a string.
And it's something you never see today anymore, which is very weird. I don't know why. Like you never really.
It's
see
just extra engineering. It's a lot of extra.
A wench kind of gimmick. It's such a shame.
It's more gearing, the rope size for kids not to, wrap it around their finger and cut off their blood circulation, and the type of breakaway you have to have, and ligature issues, and the world is much more litigious more than ever, and continues to be, and the sheer fact of making something puts you in the crosshairs for having caused any damage, let alone actual malfeasance or oversight or, breakage or something. So string, that kind of string is not as prevalent today, for sure.
If you could go back and, let's say, let's start with his color. What color would you have gone with instead of this bright orange? Obviously hindsight being 2020.
Well, I think I would have gone with a subtler orange.
Okay.
A more classic yellow orange, more towards the yellow. This is like Hazard Pylon kind of orange. It's more caustic, I think it's more offensive visually, potentially, than something a little lighter in tone. The blue is too intense in its vibrancy. So I think I would knock that down, and I would have spread out. Right now, it's like I used blue as the accent everywhere, on the robot, on the crane. I think I should have maybe not put the blue on the crane, and had a different, like, dark gray or gunmetal metallic or something to just make the ladder look like a cool ladder cannon, and then have the robot be the orange and blue, and that might have caused some separation to make it a little cooler. You're getting the full designer point of view on this one. There's some.
That's the whole point.
and I definitely would have made the head thinner. He's kind of got an R2-D2 head with a human face sculpted on it.
Yeah.
And I think he's a cooler guy as I envisioned him to be, a little more rough and tumble, a little bit like the guy that would be sucking on a spark plug, So I don't mind his face. I just wish it wasn't so wide and round on there.
When you guys did the hoist toy, and we're not going to cover the hoist one today, but was that hoist toy developed with the intention that this is the next version of this character, or were they just designed and that would be fiction later?
Yeah, I think it was fiction later, or that's just how we. Yeah.
Because there's design similarities between the two. So, like in terms of the sculpt itself. So I was always wondering, was it intended to be two separate characters, and then it just a happy coincidence later or something when it came to storytelling for the product?
Yeah, it was more a little bit of that. I think we had that kind of truck already in development, and then.
Okay, cool. And then, of course, afterwards, like many of these other Armada products, this would be also repainted in those Battle of the Box Universe 2-packs. But this one found its way to Market 6 back in the day. Pretty tough to come by, that blue one, though.
The blue one? Yeah.
Yeah, it's not as because it was in the Market 6 territories, which right away, that's not Canada, so there goes that whole region. And then unless you were going to like a Walgreens or something back then, they were kind of kicking around like 2 per case, and that's it.
But I think if you look at, we'll have a picture up, I'm sure, of the blue one. I think it's more forgiving when you look at it in those colorways.
Lessons learned.
And all of a sudden it's, it doesn't stick out to me. Again, I don't hate the character. I get asked, about it, and I got to identify something that, you missed on enough things that you can go, I wish I had another shot at it. And that's why that guy gets chosen, But I do like a lot of the things about it.
Me personally, I feel that he's perfectly fine. I kind of always how I always approach a lot of Transformers is I go, okay, deluxe price point. I know what the limits of what something can be, and I something like Sideswipe to me I think was a little more than Smokescreen. I was pretty cool with. I kind of like them.
Smokescreen, it's that orange, man. It's the orange.
Yeah, it's probably just the colors that is the issue. But that could be changed.
Yeah.
That could always be changed. Next up, we're going to cover Transformers Armada Wheeljack, a.k.a. Rampage in Transformers Micron Detsetsu, his Japanese version.
Yeah.
This one is interesting just because if you just looked at the mold, didn't know the colors, like just a gray prototype, didn't know the colors, didn't know the name of the character and anything, you right away go, oh, it's G1 Sideswipe. That's kind of what's going on here. We have, again, the rumors of the internet was, according to Aaron Archer, the final head design, for Armada Wheeljack was unintentional, at least to Hasbro. Unbeknown to the American toy company, Takara had designed and sculpted the head to resemble G1 Sideswipe. No doubt due to the similarities of the robot mode in both the car mode, even though this one's a Ferrari and Sideswipe was a Lambo, but that's the car guy in me. The Hasbro team were surprised when they received the prototype from Japan. So, is that true? You didn't know about the head sculpt initially?
No, I don't think that's accurate.
That's why I bring these up, because gotta fix the rumors.
I would love to cross-pollinate with Eric on this one. I believe this is one of his first items that he was probably more responsible for drawing.
Eric C. Beneller, for people that aren't aware.
Yep. So, I did not draw this vehicle ever. Eric did.
And the vehicle he's referring to is a Ferrari F50.
Okay.
That's to the best that they could do without getting sued by Ferrari.
I think he did the deco sheet. I had heavy say in, what the feature was going to be, but he drew it all out. And I believe I remember drawings of those heads, and they were very, I wouldn't call them sideswipe heads or wheeljack heads or whatever, but they were informed by his exploration of the G1 head aesthetic, which is very much the classic, it looks like they're wearing helmets, like they're metal men wearing helmets of some sort. Like they could almost take them off. Yeah. So I feel like that is as much his exploration into the early aesthetic of heads as it was a direct homage of any kind. That's what I recall. And again, this is definitely a lot of his design vision in this. As far as where you want to go with next?
Well, I was going to say, so he has some unique features. He comes with wind shear, his Minicon, which is some kind of little stealth bomber that activates a very DeLorean kind of gull wing door opening gimmick, which also leads to this is how he's going to shoot his missiles and stuff. So nice little kind of features going on there. Again, Ferraris don't have gull wings, but they kind of just went with something similar to that. Again, it adds to, it could kind of be a, flight mask, Thunderhawk kind of, play pattern. The missiles could make two little Tomfas. So there's that kind of cool little aspect where two little projectiles could also be melee weapons. Again, he has the veneering sculpt of that Autobot logo slashed out, Decepticon logo under, which right away is a storytelling piece in itself. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if you want to kind of jump in on that one.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what it is. I think at the time we were having so much fun as a big group. Kind of co-development is up and running. We kind of got a vibe going. Wheeljack was a later wave kind of item, or middle later wave. Mm-hmm. So we're feeling good, and we're telling the story that we kind of know the general direction of at this point, or we're building it at the same time. So we had Sideways, which was a character that was unknown what his allegiance was. Kind of, he could be this or that, depending on how he was being played. Wheeljack was kind of like an Autobot in our early discussion that had been either turned or left, had some catastrophic incident and turned his back on the Autobots and went, to the Decepticons. That was about the extent of our storytelling internally, and then how the cartoon used it is how they used it. That's what I recall. So we were just having fun and trying to tell more story directly on the products. I will say, as a whole, Armada had raised Autobot and Decepticon sigils on the plastic cars, right? They weren't tampoed or painted in a lot of the early product, a lot of the Armada product, period.
Sculpted in, yeah.
Sculpted in, right in the tooling. Over time, that became a real issue.
Yeah.
Because every time we wanted to change allegiance or redeco something or whatever, they had to go back into steel and fill that back in to make it not be that allegiance.
Change the mold just so it doesn't have an Autobot logo.
Yeah, and you want to do redecos so they don't cost you anything other than maybe some paint masks or something. But when you have to go in and actually manufacture on the tool some work, and then you've taken the ability to ever have that logo there again, right? So if they were to go back and try to make an authentic Armada somebody, those logos wouldn't be there anymore. They got rubbed out along the way for different Costco things and, the stuff that came later.
Oh, so you're trying to say if they ever did, let's say they wanted to go back and do a reissue of Hot Shot, let's say.
There's the potential that that logo has been taken
logo
off.
On the shoulder's not there. Interesting. Okay.
There's the potential that it was coming up at different times, and I know we did rub it out of certain items. I can't recall what items, but all that to say, those raised logos, which seem fun in our storytelling and bring attention to the Autobot and Decepticon iconography of the brand, and that's what we're trying to celebrate, make a bigger deal out of it. Having them 3D like that became an issue.
Well, I can imagine, especially with this mold.
Painting.
Think about it.
Yeah.
Think about it with this one even. Like, this mold itself is telling a story with that character because, there's the slashed Autobot logo and the small Decepticon one sculpted under it. And then it's like, if you wanted to repaint anything out of it, you're stuck with that storytelling element. Where no matter what you repaint it into, it's also a guy that slashed his Autobot logo.
To your point, like with that head and everything, you don't think along the way at BotCon we could have used that tool? That it's a car, it's easy transformation, it looks like a G1 guy. Like, had that logo not been sculpted in there, this guy could have been redecoed 100 times by now.
Yep. Well, and that's why in the history of that character, there was an unreleased Battle in the Box 2-pack that was going to happen where they were going to repaint him as Drench, which was an old G2 water squirting kind of transformer. And that one never happened, ultimately, in the end. And then years later, with BotCon 2008, they did Shattered Glass Sideswipe, which works well with that idea. Because there's that whole, Autobot, Decepticons, good is bad, bad is good. So they were able to write that in, again, because of the story elements and the sculpt. It's kind of funny how that works, but you are right, where you're kind of stuck with certain things when you sculpt it in there.
Yeah. And it's not cheap. To go back here's what we're talking about. There's a reverse mold of these toys, right, in steel in Hong Kong. We've talked about at times you're doubling up molds and stuff, so you got multiple cavities with the same issue. You got to send somebody in there to weld that up or cut it out, grind it down or weld it out, right? One depending on if it's raised or lowered. And you got to do that to every cavity to the same, and then you got to run it through testing again. You got to make sure it didn't create any other issues.
Air bubbles and everything. So
again, something that you're trying to do to be a quick redeco or an opportunistic use of your tooling, affordably or cost effectively, might cost you a lot of effort, and that's a lot of time to weld, to get those heavy metal tools down to the shop, welded up, back up to the the floor where they're producing the products. These are heavy, hundreds of pounds things that get picked up with forklifts. It's just you're adding complication, and that's why this guy didn't get a lot of redeco time.
And also a weird kind of thing about this mold too. For some reason, one of his wrists was articulated, the other one wasn't. Like it just had one piece which just did that. And he was also one of the few Armada toys that had knee articulation. And just weird stuff with that one. Again, probably because later release, a lot of stuff going on with that mold.
Yeah, so that's probably a direct reaction to the guy we previously talked about. So that guy had bad articulation in a way, or posability. Well, maybe we should make this guy more posable. That kind of stuff comes up.
And the last one we're going to talk about, and we're going to kind of do these as a batch. So another thing that also Armada had in kind of the tail end of its line during the Unicron battles was we saw a 5-pack crew. They weren't sold together, but 5 original Beast Wars toys were repainted and resculpted, given some Minicon, little activation points on them, sculpted on there, which I'm going to definitely want to cover how that went about. But we had Transmetal Airazor, Transmetal Cheetor, Transmetal Terrorsaur, Transmetal Rhinox, and Transmetal Megatron turned into brand new characters, repainted, and re-released into the Armada line. First thing I want to cover is how did they decide? Why did they decide to go with these? Was it to fill out the line, to have more product out there? So we'll start with that question.
Yes, absolutely. So at this point, Armada is finding success. We can't, we already shipped the early stuff. We can't pump out any more, so we're looking for easy ways to get more product out fast. And we had great success with Beast Wars. Right? We knew kids liked the animal molds. We knew dinosaurs and stuff always are going to be great. So we had access to those tooling, that old Beast Wars tooling, and we found enough items that we felt fit the bill for creating this little subset group. At the time, this was pure market product exercise. We need more product. What tools do we have? Let's get them out there. What we needed to do then was make them Armada based so that they could fall under the same kind of play pattern or communication of a play pattern. So we were able to find a Minicon team various Minicon teams to break apart. We added Minicon mail ports to these items. And again, this is a perfect conversation. So if they go to make Rhinox again, they had to take a Minicon port out of the tool.
So today, if they try to reissue Transmetal Rhinox, there's a Minicon port on that tooling.
Yeah.
God damn. God, so that's going to be very interesting, and I'll tell you why.
Now, depending on how many cavities there are, maybe they only did it to a certain amount of cavities, but, they're not keeping these things around. So the last time it got used is probably what it is.
See, that's fascinating because the conversation constantly comes up because Hasbro's been doing Beast Wars reissues recently with Walmart as an exclusive subline with them. And the conversation keeps coming up. When are they going to do reissues of Transmetals? When are they going to do reissues? and now it's going like, oh man, does that mean that like if they reissue Transmetal Cheetor, which for sure is going to be, if they're going to pick one guy, it's going to be him. Does that mean that those Minicon ports are probably on his thrusters?
They probably are today, and then they will have to make a decision whether or not to go back into the mold and weld that up so that
oh my goodness,
that's no longer part of the mold. So we picked these ones. We tried to give them somewhat realistic-y, earthy colors, although that Cheetor is definitely not definitely not realistic in any way.
Purple cat.
So I will say it was very very tactical, very very opportunistic, and when you're selling out of something, you need something on the shelf. So it's really this is kind of a great thing in toys when this happens, even though it is an outlier. So I'm fond of these because it means we were doing really well, even though it was kind of a weird project. Now, how to fit them into whatever we were doing was not important in the biggest scheme of things. It was never going to be part of the animation. That was all done and set. And it was probably not even going to be something that made it to the Japanese market, right? So
they had, at most, a lot of the weird Armada Western exclusive stuff got limited releases in Japan under the Toys R Us USA edition, as they would call them, which they didn't change the packaging, they didn't localize it, they just stuck a sticker on it, and that's it. But that's the extent of it, including these guys.
Yeah, so it was very much a US-based sales situation. It wasn't until a little bit later that there was some chatter online about the potential of these guys that people started talking about. I wish I remembered the gentleman's name who kind of started considering them the Four Horsemen of Unicron, but that all came out of 2005 board discussions. Somebody brought it up, and I said, that is a really cool idea. It makes sense. It ended up becoming fiction. And that's what, exactly. Yeah. So we took that concept and ran with it. And since we wanted to make hay somehow with these characters, we threw them over to Dreamwave to do something with. And Simon, being Simon, took that concept of heralds for Unicron, as he would, knows how to do, and ran with it. And that's how you get that fiction in the comic book being that.
For people that aren't aware, Simon Furman wrote the second half of the Armada books.
Yeah. So at the beginning, all it was straight redecos with the Minicon feature, and then over time in the collector, our story world space, if you're deep into it, that's when it became the four heralds of Unicron, which is still an awesome concept. Though
it's a good use of. There's a few things I want to cover here. So number one, what I love about this is you have Armada, which was very successful for Hasbro, considering that Robots in Disguise it did okay. Beast Machines did not really do that well. So I find it interesting how when Armada needed to fill out its line, it went to the last successful Transformer line, which was Beast Wars, to use that instead of using Robots in Disguise robot molds or Beast Machines. They went and it was a zag. So if we were doing a lot of vehicles, we had no beasts all of a sudden. So it was an opportunity to kind of get another form factor back on shelf. That in there. Yeah. There was none of that at all. You're right.
Yeah. So
another thing too, the original ones had chrome on them. These ones, you guys didn't go with chrome. Any reason for that?
Costs.
That's what I figured.
That extra hot stamp just wasn't needed for us. Yeah.
The tooling already, probably for the Minicon ports, we're probably already eating that. So.
Yeah, and I would imagine. Anytime you are working with older product, the conditions by which that product was costed and manufactured in its day can be wildly different when you go to reissue it in a modern sense.
I believe that was a 4-year gap right there.
Yeah. So, when I look at Beast Wars toys, there's a lot of assembly, there's a lot of ball joint tolerances that have to be really, checked out, as you all know. The hot stamp would just been an easy thing to get some money back that would make it probably a little more in line with the Armada product, the newly developed product we were making at the time, so that the overall cost structures could, somewhat stay intact.
And like you mentioned, to kind of make it fit in with the brand, because nothing else was really sporting chrome in Armada at the time also.
Yeah. Now,
to my knowledge,
were these went everywhere? These were in the normal waves. These weren't exclusives or anything.
Yeah, these were available everywhere.
Yeah.
I always say if it showed up in Quebec, then it was everywhere. Yeah. If it showed up here, then there was French on there. It's good to go. So
that's funny.
these were plentiful. They were fine. Yeah. Another thing too that I also want to mention, like you mentioned before, the Minicons and how because for people that aren't aware, like mention how like normally Minicons they're on the mold with their character.
Yeah.
Like if you have Jolt could not be tooled and sold on his own. He has to be with Hotshot.
So when we look at the I guess 5 releases, what we did was we took
complete sets.
Yeah, we took 2 Minicon teams, which each Minicon team within itself shares molding, and that's why we could never take a single car out of the speed team and just put it with somebody, because you'd have to manufacture the parts for the other 2 and then waste them, and that's just not a good way to go. So the benefit is you get a lot of bang for your buck when you share molds. The limitations are colors can blend together, and you cannot, separate them out. So what we had to do here is we took 2 separate teams, manufactured them, right, and then in the factory, split them out with the appropriate partner. That's another very high level of complexity. You're requiring the factory floor to kind of start matching up 2 different items that aren't connected by any kind of numbers or history, and make sure the right one goes with the right one. I mean, it's obviously not impossible, but it just adds extra effort,
extra wrinkle that the factory worker has. Because, like, to give an example, Airazor on the mold doesn't have that Night Scream Minicon, So when it's being assembled in the factory worker has to know, okay, I'm assembling this Airazor, and at some point I got to get that brown car that's being assembled on a completely different area or whatever, and make sure those 2 are together. I'm actually surprised, despite the complexity of this, that we've never seen mixed up Minicons with certain figures sealed in the package. I'm actually surprised that it's never been reported.
Yeah, they probably separated them out. But another thing that we have talked about in different ones, and I'm sure we will talk about again, sometimes you'd run into also 2 different factories might have been responsible for these toolings. So in this case, it might have all fallen under the same factory. But what if the Minicons were manufactured over here on this side of the river, but the Beast Wars products were manufactured over here at a different factory? Now you got to marriage those up. That can get complicated too. That's another reason that Takara and like G.I. Joe or G.I. Joe and Transformers have extra levels of complications. People are like, oh, just add a Snake Eyes figure with a, Sideswipe, figure. And it's like, well, that's very complex to do,
Yeah. But it was smart, like how you guys, like, you took the adventure team and you broke up those members so you could put it each with a Beast Wars character. But again, like you said, the complexity of it, it's like you're assembling that Rhinox toy, and someone in the factory has to know, hey, that blue snowplow, make sure it goes with him. Even there's no indication of that, Yeah. They're 2 very different colored figures, where Minicons also historically have kind of color matched a little bit.
Yeah, well, and they had already manufactured these guys in a different color, so all of a sudden, what? We're breaking them up, So again, not impossible or anything, but just an speaks
extra
to
step
the layers.
That could lead to problems. Yeah. Also to mention, along with Sideways, the Predacon, I guess we'll call it the Megatron, but the Predacon character are the only 2 Armada products that came with 2 Minicons. It was him and Sideways are the only 2, so you got a little bang for your buck also there, where everyone usually just came with 1 Minicon. But again, it's also the advantage of, again, having those tooled elsewhere beforehand. But yeah, these were very unique. Again, making the best use of those, because in Japan, they painted those Minicons every color of the rainbow. So for the Western market to get something a little different at some point is really nice. There's one thing too we want to address is the Airazor itself, the Airazor mold. So again, we're going to the rumor mill, which somehow has your name attached to it. According to Aaron Archer, the molded Decepticon emblem on Airazor's toy was not in any of Hasbro's plans. How it got there is unknown. Aaron Archer suggests as a rationale for the symbol that she was a spy, which is still unclear. And that's it. So on pretty much what they're referring to is the Airazor toy was marketed as an Autobot character. It has Autobot Tampo on it, but on the back of the figure, sculpted into it, meaning it was done in the factory, and it's a sculpted Decepticon emblem is on the back of the robot mode, which could imply, oh, it's a spy, like it's hiding its allegiance or something. This was never planned, though. So do you? And it says here you don't know anything about it. I guess that is correct.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at pictures here. It's interesting because obviously the first Airazor didn't have a Decepticon logo on there.
No, not at all. Yeah, so that was something that was done clearly afterwards when they got the tooling for doing. It's like they were doing the tooling for the Minicon ports, and then someone decided to slap a Decepticon emblem in there too, a raised one, in the skull.
Yeah, I don't know. I could hazard a few guesses. It'd just be speculation though. I wouldn't want to cause grief.
Put more rumors out there.
Yeah, I don't need to add more gasoline to craziness, but I don't know. Yeah, that's an interesting one because someone obviously made some effort, but it could have been someone was getting ahead of themselves and just assumed by the colors or something. But
maybe they thought the adventure Minicon guys are Autobots. Maybe they thought the Megatron and the Airazor, which are the Speed Street team, maybe they thought they'd be Decepticons.
Yeah, maybe. But I can imagine that there's I don't know. I don't want to. That's weird, but you can see that if that was a painted or tampoed logo, we'll take that off. Oh, they made a mistake.
Yeah, you can get rid of it.
But once it's there in plastic, it's there, and
which once again, now if they ever go and revisit that for a reissue, there's a maximal Airazor toy with a Decepticon logo on the back. Good Lord.
Yeah. So these you're seeing the suit being made here.
Well, it's not only that. I'm thinking of the future because they want to use these molds at some point, and now they're going to have all these hiccups.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Interesting. Another one too.
I've doomed the anniversaries.
Yeah, you've doomed all the reissue stuff. This is something I might want to have to talk about on the podcast in the future. Now I'm going to have to sit on this one. But another one too is Rhinox. What was an interesting thing, and this is probably just factory error. All the Rhinoxes, their feet were assembled. They were swapped. It's not something that you would really notice. It's just that you could just see where the mold is injected. Normally, there's these little, very hard to tell, but these little holes where you could see kind of where the mold of the plastic is injected. They're normally located on the inside of the legs, so you don't notice it when you're looking at the toy. But because the feet were swapped, they're on the outside and you can notice it. It's not a big thing. It's just every single Armada Rhinox has that, and obviously the original Beast Wars ones didn't have that where they were swapped the other way. Just a little note there. But yeah, that's anything else you want to say about these guys before we close it off for the day?
No, those were largely led by a new name in the canon here, Brian Parrish. He was primarily and still is a Star Wars designer, or was for a long time, and then he moved to other things. But he did. Yeah,
you've mentioned the name before. I believe we were talking. Yeah.
He did these as a help because we were in such a fast-paced mode that to add these 4 deco sheets and run it through the paces of picking the Minicons and he came in to help us with these, and then he ultimately also did Universe at the same time. So he's like the repaint guy in a lot of ways. Kinda. He was a great guy to come in and just help us out, get the practical stuff done. We don't need you to overthink anything. Okay. We just need these items, executed, and he knows how to run stuff through the system and got those done. So those decos and choices were largely him. I nodded. He's a good friend and a professional. So I was like, oh, these look great. Thank you.
Cool.
So I want to call him out on those.
Awesome. And the last thing, I just forgot to mention too, is one of these guys, specifically the Megatron, doesn't suffer from gold plastic syndrome. So the original Transmetal Megatron today, unfortunately, has terrible brown GPS kind of plastic, which is dangerous to transform him. Where this one doesn't suffer from that, from a choice of a different color of plastic. So that's another thing too I forgot to mention with that mold. And of course, another thing too is a lot of these characters, specifically the Minicons, had very interesting choices of trademark names. Airazor had Night Scream, a Beast Machines one. The Predacon had Sideburn and Skid Z, which were both from Robots in Disguise the year before. You had Cliff Jumper for Cheetor. You had Ironhide for the Terrorsaur, and you had Armorhide, which again another Robots in Disguise trademark, was used for the Iceberg mold, the snowplow that came with Rhinox. So also a good place to dump some trademarks that need to be
so that's
put somewhere.
Perfect example there of we have a bunch of new characters coming in. They're not primary to a story in animation or anything. They don't have to be important names per se, but if we have protected names that we like, that we need to use again, just throw them on there and go. So Skid Z, just go, whatever.
Exactly. Kept Sideburn alive. So that's more or less it. Yeah, kept them going as a red repaint. That's more or less it. Again, we just kind of wanted to just dive into some Armada characters that we didn't cover extensively. We got a good hour and then some of talk. We're definitely going to, again, visit Armada more, especially I get a feeling that when a lot more of these brand new Armada-related products are going to come out, we're going to probably want to revisit some of those old versions of those characters and see what they did with the new versions, and a lot of fun stuff that could be done there. Again, if you guys have any suggestions or questions, again, be sure to just post below in the comments, and be sure to share the podcast and let us know what you think. Anything else you want to say, Aaron, before we close it up on these Armada guys and gal, actually, with Airazor?
No. A lot of fun talking about these today. Looking forward to more.
Awesome. So, again, this is the Toy Armada with Aaron Archer, and I'm your host, Protoman. And we've been talking about Armada, and we're going to be talking about Armada some more. So until then, we'll talk to you again in the near future.